Welcome to Energy Talks, a regular podcast series focused on power system testing topics. My name is Scott Williams from the Omicron podcast team, and I will be your host. It goes without saying that we are still going through challenging times, but it is always amazing to hear stories about how colleagues in this industry continue to find innovative ways to still get the job done in order to ensure power system reliability. One such colleague is Gustav Lundqvist, who has joined us for this episode. He is the CEO and founder of Kraftdiagnos, a service company that provides utility companies in Sweden with diagnostic measurements on medium and high voltage equipment. Gustaf spent the past 2 years as a road warrior while growing his business. He covered incredible distances to perform measurements on medium voltage stations, power lines, telephone towers, and wind parks throughout Sweden. Some of this travel was by car, but mostly he walked these great distances to reach remote measurement sites. Gustaf, welcome to Energy Talks.
Yeah, thanks.
Gustaf, could you tell us about your company and where in Sweden you are located?
Sure. Our company is called Kraftdiagnos. Translated to English, it would be Diagnos. And we're located in Umeå. It's in northern Sweden.
Gustaf, I understand that you and your growing company had an incredible past 2 years. But before we talk about that, could you tell us a bit about yourself? How did you get into this business?
Yeah, sure. I've been in the business for 11 years. Before I became an engineer, I was actually a teacher. So I used to teach math and physics at should I say college level. And then I switched to become a master's in engineering. Yeah, and then things just took off.
That's great. Well, we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. What types of measurements do you or does your company specialize in?
Yeah, we perform mainly grounding measurements. But the plan is that we're going to do essentially all types of measurements with all the Omicron system. So transformer testing, reactor testing, breaker testing, testing of current and voltage transformers and tan delta essentially. But for now, the grounding measurements, that's where we are established. And then we use the CPC 100, CPC 1, and that's the system for the heavy current method. You use it to measure stations essentially. And then you let the power grid, use the power grid as essentially current probes. Another station is current probe. And you send a current using the Omicron system for approximately sometimes 250 kilometers and down into the earth. Yeah, and back again. So the Omicron system actually can deliver a current that goes 500 kilometers through the power lines and back through the earth. And it's just an amazing system.
Yeah, please tell me how it does that.
Yeah, so essentially got two systems. You got the CPC 100, that is the power source, and then you got the CPC 1, that's essentially an insulation transformer system, and you can increase the voltage to about 500 volts. And then you got a coupling unit called the CPGB1 with lightning arresters. So you take a power line out of service and make sure that it is grounded in both ends. And then you inject the current, often drawing with 500 volts. And then it goes up through the power line and away to a remote station. And back again. And then you essentially energize the entire landscape around the station. So you go around the station and out in the low voltage grid and do measurements within 3 kilometers and simulate an earth fault and do touch voltage measurements. And sometimes when doing these measurements, you realize that, hey, if you have an earth fault right now, we might have a couple of thousand volts between earth contacts, for instance, in buildings, and the ground where you stand. So you
Okay.
essentially identify dangerous stations and dangerous spots out in the grid.
That's great. Well, you had mentioned before that you were using your CPC 100 and the related accessories. How do you use Campano in performing your measurements? What do you use it for?
The CPC 100, I should say, that is a legacy system. It's kind of old, but hey, it's tested. We know that it works.
Yeah.
And the Campano system is the little brother of the CPC 100. It is
Yeah.
much lighter. It weighs only 10 kilos. And
Yes.
the device is really, really easy to handle, and it's really user-friendly. And when you use the Campano system, you have to use a backpack with, in our case, we use telephone lines. So we roll out
Yes.
500 meters of telephone lines, both the current electrode and the voltage electrode. You connect them into the earth by a number of ground rods. And then you essentially push a button, and then you get the earthing impedance of the station. And you use that system for, first of all, medium voltage stations up to 84 kilovolt. And
Yeah.
if you have a TND system, a directly earth system, the CPC 100 is a necessity.
Okay. So I was going to ask you, why are these measurements important? And so really it's a matter of safety. Is that correct?
Yeah, matter of safety.
Okay.
And the really scariest thing with these measurements was that when we started measuring, we realized that many of the previous measurements were performed with older technicians had essentially put motors on a home built system and
Yes.
started to inject current and did measurements. And often they did measurements with a really small radius around the station. And sometimes we did measurements and we found out that, for instance, 10 buildings sometimes had really high touch voltage values.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that, for instance, if you touch the kitchen stove and kitchen sink and there is an earth fault, and in the 400 kilovolt power system, you might get an electric shock.
So, Gustaf, in doing these measurements, who are you doing them for? Who are your customers?
According to the Swedish regulations, you will have to do these tests every 12 years. So, first of all, the main grid companies that has the 130 kilovolts, and
Yes.
then there is the 220 and the 400 kilovolts. And you both do the measurement as a periodic measurement, but also when you build a new station to commission it.
Gustaf, you mentioned that you were an instructor before. I understand that you still teach people how to do these measurements you just described.
So I essentially went around Sweden for 9 years lecturing and saved money to be able to buy advanced measurement systems.
Speaking of which, in 2019, you purchased your first Omicron testing equipment.
Yeah, and it changed everything. Because before, when I was both a consultant and a lecturer, I essentially sold my time. That was the gig. You take a certain amount of money per hour. But with the Omicron devices, it's a totally different thing. You don't sell your time anymore. You sell a service. So, for instance, you can have on a fixed amount per station. And if you measure a lot of stations every day, you earn much more money. So essentially you can increase your daily salary with 3 or 4 times.
So, Gustaf, how did the acquisition of this equipment and attending a course at Omicron Academy prepare you for offering these measurements as a service?
Well, I should first of all say that if I look at my own education, so I got 2 masters, one in energy engineering and one in teaching. I would say that I use about 1% of my education. So that's really, really low. And during the years, I've been working to educate others in relevant information. that they
Yes,
need
practical information.
to do their job. And when I went to Erlangen, the education was totally relevant. No fluff, no nothing that was unnecessary. I started mentioning and also got the practical experience. So theory and practical experience, that's what you need.
So, starting in 2020, we were all faced with challenges we had not expected, and it still affects our work in many ways. Gustaf, you were at a starting point in your business, and it must have been a challenge for you to get things going. How did you respond to this?
Yeah, and in March, the stock market crashed. Everything went down like 40-50%. And what I did then, I went away and I bought a headset. And I started making telephone calls, selling services.
Yeah.
So I realized that, hey, things might go really, really bad right now with the economy, or things might go down and then up again. I do not know. So I started making a lot of telephone calls, and within, I would say, 2 weeks, I had huge amount of work. A lot of customers needed the measurement services. So I did those calls, prepared, packed my car, and went away.
Gustaf, I understand that you are a real outdoors kind of guy and an avid sportsman. How did this play a role in performing measurements for your customers?
Well, I got to say what type of availability do you have to do something that other people don't do? So I'm an elite athlete. I've trained for 17,000 hours, essentially. And it's a mix of cross-country skiing, kayaking, multi-sport running, CrossFit, and different types of training methods. So that meant that per day I can walk really, really long distances and have.
So you have a lot of stamina through your training.
Yeah, and carry a lot of stuff. So per day walking, for instance, 30 kilometers in one day with a backpack, no problem.
I bring this up because it certainly has to do with the way you went about doing measurements. And that's because most of the measurement sites you visited were difficult to access. And so your ability to walk to them was quite an advantage, right?
Yeah, sure. So there was a lot of telecom towers that are placed on really tall mountains. Sometimes they were flown in there using helicopters. So in some cases, you essentially just had a trail at best. Often you had to park the car and then walk 4 kilometers from the road to the communication tower. And also, there was a lot of climbing and really, really steep decline in the mountain.
Oh my gosh.
The component system is a kind of nice system because it fits excellent in a backpack called the douchebag carry-all. It's a 40-liter bag. So you place it in that bag, and then you attach the bag to the Fjällräven fire brigade frame. So you can essentially carry the component on a really nice backpack. And then we created a special line system for the telephone lines that we use. And that saved a lot of weight compared to the old system. So this summer I used a system that essentially weighs 30 kilos, 35 kilos, essentially. But the summer of 2019, the weight was 50 kilos.
Wow.
And that was it's a big difference.
So Gustaf, your experience with hiking into these remote sites by carrying everything in your backpack certainly made you think twice about what you take with you and how you can lighten up your load.
So you drill holes into things. You remove everything that you don't need.
So now, how long would these measurements take when you would be in these remote locations?
It depended. It wasn't that long because, walking, for instance, 10 kilometers with a backpack doesn't take that long time. So I would say you're in and out in about 3 hours at most.
Okay.
That's
So it wasn't as though you were doing an overnight measurement and you were camping on site or anything like that.
no, nothing like that. But if you do that type of climbing 4 to 5 times per day, so if every mountain means a 3 kilometer walk up the mountain, and then 3 kilometers down, you got 6
Right.
kilometers. And then I got to get out with the probes also, so you got 7 kilometers. And if you do that 3 or 4 times per day with a backpack, it's starting to feel, I can assure you.
Oh my gosh. So you conducted a number of measurement tours in this fashion throughout Sweden. Could you estimate how many kilometers or miles you traveled by foot in this way?
It's real difficult to assume, but I would say maybe 1,500 kilometers. I don't know.
Wow.
I got no idea. And the terrain is really different from southern Sweden to northern Sweden. So in the north, you got big, thick forests, and you got to go through swamps, for instance, and do climbing. But if you go down in southern Sweden, there are more fields and more streets, and it's easier to get everywhere.
Gustaf, how long were you gone on these measurement tours?
Yeah, the longest one was for 30 days.
Wow. Without even being able to go home for a break? Or
no way. So you're essentially just out by yourself or with a colleague, essentially. So and there's something really beautiful about it, because you live a really Spartan life. You have the car, Volkswagen Passat, and then you got a couple of backpacks with some clothing, and the Omicron devices, of course, and you just go to different areas doing measurements, and go buy some salad at night at a store, and then you do some training outside, and then you just sleep, and then you wake up and do it all over again.
Do it all over again. But at least you had nice scenery the whole time.
Yeah, and here's the thing. When you get in that car, all your problems disappear. It's just so nice.
That's great. Well, very enviable. Now, you had mentioned in the beginning, say last year in March, when you were getting your company started, you were literally the only employee, the first employee, and now you have a team of 10 employees. But at that time, were you really alone, or did you have...
Yeah, I had a little buddy, 4-legged buddy. So Nisse, he was a 1-year-old Welsh Springer Spaniel. So I took him with me.
Oh, great.
All the time.
What's his name?
Nisse. So
Nisse.
Nisse. Yeah, it's a Swedish name. And when going in the forest, he found birds everywhere, because he's a hunting dog. So he likes just running into birds and just give them a paw, essentially, boom, and then they fly away.
So, Gustaf, with the revenue you generated in the past year doing all these measurements, I understand that in addition to adding employees, you also invested in new test equipment.
So I started to think, okay, what should I invest in that is really safe in the long term? And I realized that, hey, heavy blue boxes, that's not a bad investment.
When you say blue boxes, you mean Omicron testing equipment?
Yeah, blue gold. So when you're buying Omicron devices, first of all, you have an increased expensive in your company. And the company pays taxes on the gain every year. And if you buy an Omicron device, you have depreciation. So you get depreciation on the buy. You don't get that on stocks or in gold and silver, but you get that in Omicron devices. So Omicron devices, A, saves you a lot of taxes. B, it gives you a really, really nice cash flow. So I think the Compound 100, that paid off itself in maybe a month. And the CPC 100 paid off itself in half a year. So you buy something that you gets you a lot of income, and then
Sure.
the next will probably just hold up for maybe 20 years. Who knows?
Okay.
So I think it's an alternative investment at large.
Sure. And as you grew your company too, with more employees, you probably wanted to have more equipment to be able to do even more
Yeah.
testing in different locations.
Yeah, I went on the shopping binge there. So I bought essentially the Testrano 600, the Freneo 800, the Durana, and also the Sibano 500, the Vitano 100, and CT
Oh,
and TD12, TD15. So we essentially bought everything that we need in the future time in the company.
so
And
it also sounds as though you're looking to increase the types of measurements that you're going to be offering customers.
yeah, we're going to go all in. So we're going to try to do all the types of testings in a large station. We're going to be able to test the transformer, the breakers, the voltage transformers, and the current transformers. And also in hydropower and wind power, we're going to test the generators also.
Okay, wonderful. The what I'd like to know is, given your experiences over the past 2 years, let's say, and starting your company and having these adventures mainly on foot, how do you reflect on that? What is the one thing that it has taught you that is going to influence the way you do business in the future?
Well, I would say when doing these measurements, you get an initial customer contact. You get to meet the customer, you get maybe to eat lunch with them sometimes. And so you get a first connection with them. They build up a trust to you.
Right.
And then when you got more advanced measurement systems, then you can call the customer and say, hey, remember me? And you can help the customers with more advanced testing equipment. So as grounding measurements, that's just the first part in a long-lasting relationship with the customers.
So it was literally your foot in the door
Yeah.
to do even more.
Yeah. And they have to do it. That's the nice part. They have to do the measurements according to the regulations, and that is not a coincidence. Because if the workplace grounding does not work, well, one might get hurt. So
Yeah.
it's a really interesting and important area of work.
Definitely, and you certainly have it covered now with your team having grown to the size it is now.
Yeah.
Now, going back to your personal interests in being outdoors, and having done a lot of these measurements alone, and then together with your first employees on foot, pretty much you turned doing measurements into a lifestyle.
Yeah, you might say that. And it's a kind of nice lifestyle also, because during the summer you just take off, you go out in the country, you do a lot of measurements, and you get to see really, really nice landscapes. You can
Sure.
see enormous power stations and waterfalls that have been turned into hydropower stations. You get to see wind parks that are enormous. So it's a really, really nice way of living. You don't sit at a desk just pushing the clock, waiting for the day to end, because you go on an adventure. That's what you do.
Definitely. How would you pair that with Omicron?
Yeah, I would say that I wrote in the article, I wrote that Omicron is not a company, it's a lifestyle. And yeah, I would totally say that. It's a way of living. Because when you can either sell your time at a desk, that's a way of living, or you can go out there, sell advanced measurement services, and do them out in the field. And it's really exciting, really fun, and you can have a life that is really, really different from the average office work.
Well, thank you again, Gustaf, for joining us for this episode of Energy Talks. It's been very fascinating to get to know you and to hear about your dedication to get the job done despite the challenges encountered along the way.
Yeah, thanks.
Gustaf, thank you again very much. And a big thank you to our audience for listening to this episode of Energy Talks. We welcome your questions and feedback. Simply send us an email to podcast@omicronenergy.com. Omicron has several years of experience in power system testing and offers you the matching solution for your application. Visit our website for more information at omicronenergy.com. Please join us to listen to the next episode of Energy Talks. Goodbye for now, everyone.